Hi everyone, it's me, and today I'm so excited for my second live, which is so exciting. I was here on No CD's live a few weeks ago, actually, and I was here with Jenna. And today I am going to be solo hosting and answering any of the questions that you may have about living with OCD, coming from both an OCD advocate and someone with a lot of lived experience. So I'm just going to wait for some people to come on in and see some questions. Let's see. Okay, so I think I'll first start with telling you all a little bit about me if you don't know who I am. I'm a 19-year-old OCD advocate and a person who lives with OCD. I live in San Francisco, California, and I am currently going to be actually in like 2 weeks, I'm going to be starting my sophomore year as a college student, which is something that I never thought I would get to say because of how severe and debilitating my OCD was for so long. But just the power of treatment and perseverance and just commitment to getting better and commitment to OCD recovery has gotten me to the point where I can say I'm about to start my sophomore year of college. I'm a clinical counseling psychology major, and I hope to one day become an OCD therapist for kids and teens to be able to help people who have experienced the same thing, who are experiencing the same things that I once experienced as someone who has struggled mightily with OCD. As many of you know, it's quite a painful disorder and it causes so much havoc on your life. And I think now I'm at a point where I can say, oh, I'm at this place where I can take a step back and try to help other people. Yes, you can all ask questions in the chat. That's the perfect way. And I can display questions that I think would apply to a lot of people. And I just want to reiterate that I'm a person with lived experience with OCD and an advocate, but I am not in no way a professional. So I'm just offering my insights as someone with OCD. But yeah, feel free to ask questions, and I'm sure many other people have similar questions or have had similar experiences. So it will help so many people by asking your questions. Let's see. But I'm so excited to be here and come back on, as I was here with Jenna a few weeks ago, and I'm so happy to be back again because I had such a great time and it was so wonderful getting to answer questions. Oh, this is actually probably pretty helpful. I run an OCD Instagram account, or an OCD account on Instagram called the Road to Recovery from OCD. I can quickly put that in the chat, and then we will get us started answering some questions. Let's see, okay. Awesome. So I just put my handle, my Instagram. Okay, let's see. Okay, this is a great first question. Okay, the question from Sierra is, how do we start treatment when we are scared? As I'm sure you know, OCD can cause depression, but for some reason, I'm scared to get treatment and be happy. I think this is a completely relatable fear because when you have OCD likes to keep you trapped in its cycle. It likes to make you think that you will never get to a place where you can be happy or you can get to a place where you can live without OCD because it has you kind of trapped. It has you imprisoned in this cycle to the point where you think that you can't function without it. So I think it makes a lot of sense that you would have that struggle, as I felt I've had similar struggles before, just as someone just feeling so scared, like what is my life going to be like without OCD? And I know that if people don't already know, the gold standard treatment for OCD is exposure and response prevention, ERP. And what that entails is kind of facing your fears head on, and that is so scary. But one of my biggest motivators when I started treatment was that whole idea of how you kind of think about all the things that your OCD doesn't allow you to do and kind of go from there. Just think, like, for me at least, my OCD, because I have a lot of like perfectionism OCD, like that revolves around school and my schoolwork, and it really interfered with my ability to have friends, with my ability to be happy. It was just so debilitating. So I think one thing that I kind of saw is thinking about all the things that I wouldn't be able to do if I continued in the cycle and the trap of OCD. So I think that was one of my biggest motivators. And even just laying it out for me when I was in a partial hospitalization program for my OCD, like I think in 2018, I even I wrote out, my treatment team had me write out and decorate my room there, with like pictures of all my goals and things that I wanted to do with being, what I would be able to do if I was successful in OCD treatment. And I think just even having those visuals, whether it be like a picture or just a lot of reminders, you could set reminders on your phone. You could really do anything to kind of show yourself, like, this is what I'm trying to get to. And this is something I would not be able to do if I continued in the cycle of OCD and if I chose not to do treatment. And I think it's also important to recognize that with treatment, treatment is so difficult and it's not going to be easy. It's going to be really, really challenging. But I think it's so important to know that you are going to face challenges, but you're also going to face many triumphs, and you're going to just have so many successes. Well, it also is really hard. And I think those successes at the end of the day will allow you to live a more fulfilling life, will allow you to do the things you want to do. So I think just making those things really clear to yourself, that will help you. And I think I definitely know that OCD can cause depression. And it, like I said, it makes sense that you would have that, you would be scared to have that hesitation. But I would just say, learning from other people, just setting those goals for yourself and trying to have like what's in mind, like, why am I doing OCD treatment? What are my values? Um, but I am wishing you the best of luck in starting treatment, all of you. I think it's such a brave thing to do. Like, it's scary. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it's terrifying starting treatment, but it's also one of the bravest things you could ever do. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the next question. Let's see. Oh, okay. This is a really good question. So it's from Eric. When did your OCD start, and when did you realize what it was to get help? So I was diagnosed fairly early with OCD, just based on the amount of time that it typically takes someone. I think it's averages about like 15 years for someone to get diagnosed with OCD after struggling and get proper treatment. But I was diagnosed when I was 12 years old. And I think I was definitely in a very lucky situation. Like, I definitely realized that not many people find themselves in the same situation. But my mom is a school psychologist. And we always kind of knew from a young age that I was a super anxious kid. Like, there were so many signs pointing to that. I had a ton of separation anxiety. I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety pretty early on because I was just so nervous. And I just had so many fears and, irrational fears in particular, which at the time we didn't know was OCD. So I started in therapy when I was around 10. And after kind of doing that for a while, if you're in the wrong type of therapy for OCD, it just gets worse. Like if you're in talk therapy, that does not help at all. I think many people probably relate to that, knowing that when you're in talk therapy and not exposure and response prevention, OCD therapy, that just makes it so much worse. And I think that I just saw, like when I was in middle school, when I was in seventh grade, it just slowly started to just control my life and dictate my every action. And it was really challenging. So my mom kind of put, the puzzle pieces. She's like, I think you may have OCD. And so she brought me to an OCD specialist, which again reiterate, I was in a very lucky situation and feel very blessed to be in a situation where I was able to get diagnosed so early on, as I know that's not the case for most people. Um, but yeah, so I was diagnosed when I was 12 years old, and I started with ERP therapy just like once a week with an ERP specialist, and it did not work. I started on medications. I was, going to therapy once a week. I was doing my exposures, but it just wasn't working. It wasn't enough. And I think I was in that with this therapist for a while, and we just started to realize it wasn't working. And then by the time that we started to realize how severe my OCD was getting, I started high school. I started my freshman year of high school. And when I was there, I became super depressed. I just kind of lost a ton of motivation because my OCD was like dictating my every move. It dominated my days to the point where I was just kind of losing myself to it. And that's at the point where I found a new therapist, my parents found a new therapist who had such a tremendous impact on my life, as she kind of helped me to realize that I could live a life without OCD if I really put in a ton of hard work. And around that time is when we realized that I needed a more intensive form of treatment, and that seeing a psychiatrist for medications and going to outpatient therapy once a week would not be enough, would not be sufficient, and did not meet my needs. So we decided that I needed to enter residential treatment. So I went across the country and I went into a residential treatment program for adolescents with OCD. And that's kind of when I started my whole journey. Okay, let's see. Uh, okay, let's see. Okay. I'm also trying to like figure this out too at the same time. Okay. Okay. So this is a great question. Hello, I'm learning about OCD rumination and intrusive thoughts. Does this type involve guilt/shame rumination? So, as someone who has struggled with intrusive thoughts and just kind of the guilt/shame that comes with it, I definitely can relate to this. I think that OCD, especially intrusive, like, one thing too, what's really important to distinguish is that rumination, while it is something that we do internally, it still is classified as a compulsion and not an obsession, despite it being us thinking about something. And we think that rumination would be a type of compulsion, or a type of obsession, but it really is a compulsion because it keeps us stuck in that cycle. We ruminate to kind of relieve the anxiety that our obsessions are bringing. We'll just think and think and think about our intrusive thoughts, just to the point where it's compulsive, where we're ritualizing. Does this type involve guilt/shame? I think one thing to acknowledge is that people who do experience intrusive thoughts, the intrusive thoughts can just be so terrifying. They can just go against your values. They can go against what you feel you value as a person, and they really make you question yourself. Like if you're having intrusive thoughts about hurting someone or about hurting yourself or just causing all this harm, you're going to be like, wait, why am I having these thoughts? Does this make me a bad person? And you're going to feel ashamed because of it. And it's kind of this whole cycle. And so many people experience this because they think that their intrusive thoughts say something about the person that they are. But one thing that's so important to acknowledge with intrusive thoughts is that you're having an intrusive thought about something because you care so much about it. So if you're having intrusive thoughts about hurting your child or hurting your partner, it a lot of time it's because you care so much about them that your OCD is choosing to attack, because OCD attacks the things that you love most, and that is exactly the same case for intrusive thoughts with really anything. Like, my OCD attacked what I loved and what I cared about the most. I've had a lot of intrusive thoughts that attacked my family and my friends and the kids that I babysit for, because I love spending time with little kids. And I did experience a lot of intrusive thoughts surrounding those people just because I care about them. I love them so much. But I think it's so important to know that you are going to feel shame, that you are going to feel guilt when you have these thoughts, but also not necessarily trying to pick apart the thoughts. Oh, what does this mean? Because that in itself is rumination. That's a compulsion that's feeding into that, um, into the OCD cycle. So just kind of sitting with the thought, oh, maybe I am a bad person. Maybe I do want to hurt my family. Maybe I do want to hurt myself, my friends, my partner, my child. So it's just thinking about all these things and learning how to sit with that discomfort is one of the major parts of OCD recovery. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next question. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Okay, the question says, "Hey, I'm so committed to overcoming OCD. I'm 22 and would just like to see my symptoms disappear. I struggle with intrusive thoughts that just won't leave my head. These thoughts revolve POCD." Okay, this is so relatable. I think for anyone who struggles with OCD, you just want your OCD to go away. Like, that's just the ultimate desire. I just, you want to be free of all the anxiety and all the distress that your OCD causes you and how it can be so debilitating. So, I think everyone with OCD just wants to be rid of it forever and not really have to deal with it anymore. But I think that is so important to show that you're so committed to overcoming it, because that will definitely, that commitment and that drive to conquer it. I mean, one thing to note is that OCD is a lifelong disorder. It's a lifelong condition, but the impact that it has on your life doesn't have to be. So even though I kind of recognize as someone who has been in recovery for a while now and am in a pretty good place, I still do exposures regularly. I still have tremendous anxiety, even though I've been on all levels of treatment for my OCD. Like today, I was at work and I had really bad anxiety, and I hadn't had that bad of anxiety in a really long time. And when that happens, you're like, wait, I thought I was gone. I thought this wasn't a thing that I was going to deal with anymore. Um, but I think just kind of being realistic with yourself and saying, hey, I am going to have OCD for the rest of my life, but I can also make sure it doesn't interfere with what I want to do with the rest of my life. So I think intrusive thoughts are just sticky thoughts. They don't like to leave your head. And one thing that exposure and response prevention treatment emphasizes is just sitting with those intrusive thoughts, sitting with the discomfort. And the idea is that over time, once you sit with the thoughts more, once you sit with the discomfort more, and you really think about, oh, if you're having these thoughts like POCD, if people don't know, that stands for pedophilia OCD, where people have these intrusive thoughts about being a pedophile, about, bringing harm to a child. And I can say that I've had a lot of those thoughts also. But as it's really important to acknowledge, OCD intrusive thoughts are ego dystonic, which means that they go against what someone values, who someone is as a person. They go against them. So they don't represent who you are as an individual. And but regardless, even if you know that, which most people who have been in OCD treatment learn that, they're still going to feel like a terrible person. They're still going to feel like there's something wrong with them because they're having these thoughts. And the thoughts will want to stay. But the whole idea is that the more that you sit with the thoughts, I mean, they're still going to be uncomfortable, but you're going to do something called like habituate. So you're just going to become more used to sitting in this uncomfy situation, sitting with these awful thoughts. And you're going to be like, oh, okay, even though this still really sucks, these thoughts are awful. They still make me uncomfortable. They don't make me as uncomfortable as I was maybe a month ago, a year ago. And I think that in itself is progress. So I think just knowing that the thoughts are going to be sticky, but that trying to get rid of them, just saying, oh, I'm going to try my best to just like eliminate this thought and just, replace it with another thought, a better thought. That's not going to help you in your OCD recovery. So it's about sitting with the discomfort, sitting with the distress that the thoughts bring you. And over time, using, the exposure and response prevention model with the goal that over time it will bring you less distress. Okay. These are really good questions. Let's see. Let's see. Okay. This is a really great question. How can we live in the present moment when our thoughts are telling us that obsessing about fears is the most important thing in the world? So, the whole trap of OCD is OCD convinces you that you can't live without it, that your obsessions and your compulsions are the only way to live, and that anything other than that, that doing your treatment will just do something horrible will happen. OCD is completely irrational. So it will tell you that something really awful is going to happen if you don't do this compulsion. Um, and I think it's like I said before, it's about like sitting with the uncertainty, sitting with the discomfort that your thoughts cause you. And as uncomfortable and as awful as that may seem in the moment, it really makes all the difference. And I can say, as someone with so much lived experience who has been doing ERP since I was 12 and really seriously since I was 14. I think that, and now I'm 19. So I've had a lot of years of ERP under my belt, and I can confidently say that it gets easier, that the exposures in the beginning, while they may seem so scary and sitting with your thoughts, may seem like the most painful thing in the world because it probably is to you at that moment. And it makes sense because OCD is awful and cruel and a big bully. But it also, it's important to know that the more that you sit with it, the less of an impact it's going to have on your life in the long run. So I kind of like to think of sitting with your thoughts and sitting with the discomfort and sitting with the uncertainty. And I know I was talking about this in my last live that I did with Jenna, but this is one of my favorite metaphors. It's kind of like OCD, exposure and response prevention, is like physical therapy. It it feels worse before it gets better. You're kind of, you're training that muscle. You're really getting to that point where you are, even though it's really, really difficult in the moment and it's really painful, over time, the more that you work that muscle, the more that you increase your strength and your resiliency, you will get to that point where you're able to do something that you want to do, where it causes you less discomfort, where you're in like a less compromising situation and you feel a lot better. So I think another thing is to really note that OCD is a bully, OCD is a liar, and that it's going to tell you all these things, but really it's just a part of it's mind games keeping you trapped And it's about noting that, okay, this is OCD playing these mind games on me again. This is OCD trying to harm me, trying to destroy my life, but I'm not going to take it. I'm going to sit with it. And I think that over time, you really start to learn that you don't need OCD and that OCD is keeping you from so much. You don't need it to get much. So, but I definitely understand the struggle as it's so difficult, and anyone can reiterate that because anyone with OCD knows how painful it can be. Okay, let's see. Um, okay, this is a really good question. How do I start treatment when I'm low income? Are there any affordable options? So I know that access to therapy is such a hard subject. Like, therapy is really expensive, especially ERP therapy. And it's such a privilege to be able to afford it and to be able to go to ERP treatment and feel you know that you're financially secure and able to continue to afford it. And I know that's a luxury for many. And even though it should be a necessity, everybody should have that access to treatment. But I think one thing is, I know that No CD, they pride themselves on offering more affordable options. And this would be something to look into more, as I am not a clinician, but I know that a lot of therapists, um, they offer what's called the sliding scale. So, a price for or like a price per session for one person, if they know that you come from a really low income background and they know that you would not be able to afford what someone else may be paying for their treatment, they will, adjust the price to a point where you can still afford the treatment. And some therapists do that. I know my therapist does that for some of her clients. And I know I've heard of a lot of other therapists doing the same thing. But I know No CD also offers some really great support groups. I know that they pride themselves on offering affordable treatment. And there are so many great resources elsewhere. I know that the International OCD Foundation, the IOCDF, .org, they have so many great resources, and there are so many excellent books. And just one thing that I love, as I'm on Instagram, I run an Instagram account called The Road to Recovery from OCD. Here, I will actually post the link right now. But just getting involved in the OCD community is so wonderful. As the OCD community, there are so many free resources out there. There are so many incredible therapists, people who I aspire to be like one day, who just have so much knowledge and information and work with so many different clients from all over. They post so many excellent posts, and just they serve as such wonderful, free, accessible resources. So there are definitely a lot of different options, but I would definitely, it's something that you kind of have to look into, which I think is sad that it just can't be something that's, accessible to everyone, because it should be. Everyone should be able to get the help that they need despite their, financial situation, their financial background. Oh, so let me post that. Okay. Let's see. I think it's posting. Oh yes, I posted the link here. Okay. I'm gonna answer another question. Um, okay. Let's see. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to find a good question. Let's see. Feel free to ask more questions. Um, let's see. Oh, here's a great one. In your experience, how can we handle anxiety when cutting compulsions? So I think they're asking, how do we, when you're trying to reduce and eliminate the amount of compulsions that you're performing, trying to engage in the response prevention as you're exposing yourself to something that's anxiety provoking and that's causing you so much anxiety in itself. And I think the idea is that um, you're exposing yourself to that, but then also trying to stop yourself, prevent yourself from engaging in the compulsion or the ritual. And that can be super anxiety provoking. And sadly, as I've said many, many times before, that it's all about with, sitting with the discomfort, sitting with the uncertainty that OCD brings. And even though that is so uncomfortable and so anxiety provoking, it's what you have to do to get to that point where you can achieve your goals and, fulfill your dreams and just get to a point where you can live where OCD isn't in the driver's seat, where you're in the driver's seat. And I think one thing that's also a really great thing is not trying to take yourself out of the anxiety, not trying to, when you're in the midst of an exposure, try to reduce the anxiety because that takes away from the exposure practice in itself. But one thing that I have found is I know and I've heard from a lot of people that, I mean, and this is what I found too, that medication is such a great way to get to a point where you can better access your exposures, where you can better sit with the anxiety, where you can sit with the uncertainty. And even though it's so uncomfortable, you're also in a uncomfortable, you're also in a place where you're capable of doing so, where you're able to do so. Um, so I think it's just really important knowing that the anxiety will always be there, and that especially when you're in the beginning of trying to reduce the amount of compulsions, just being much more aware of what you're experiencing. I think that that is so important, and knowing that it's going to be anxiety provoking, but that anxiety is going to get you to the place that you want to get to at the end of the day. And like one of the first questions said, um that really living this values based life to where you're doing these things because you know that OCD, because you want to do something in the future, you're doing the exposure, you're sitting with all the uncertainty and all the discomfort because you want to be able to spend time with your kids, you want to be able to spend time with your family, you want to be able to go to college. That was one thing, one of my main motivators is I knew that just with the nature of my OCD and all my compulsions, as I said, I struggle primarily with perfectionism OCD around school. And it was to the point where I was barely functioning. I was staying up every day until 5 in the morning doing compulsions. I was doing and redoing my homework because I felt that it had to be perfect or else something really bad would happen. And that I would just be this awful person if I wasn't perfect. And that's what my OCD told me. And I think that it was really scary because I'm like, oh, what if I start spending less time on homework? What if I start cutting down on my compulsions? Will I do less, academically? Will I not be as strong of a student? And that was a really big fear of mine because I really value school and doing well in school is something that's important to me. But OCD, obviously, because it was something that it was important to me, it attacked it. And like I said, OCD attacks what's important to us, what we love most. And for me, I really cared about my education and it chose to attack it as the nature of OCD would. Um, so I think for me, just really recognizing that if I kept on staying up until 5 a.m. every night doing and redoing my homework, engaging in the rewriting and rereading compulsions, checking, reassurance seeking, that I would not be able to attend college and that would not be possible because I was at the point where I was, burning out. And if I continued on that track, I am most certainly definitely positive that I would not be at college. And one thing that is probably one of the best, most rewarding things is to really be able to kick your OCD in the butt and just say, I don't need you any longer. You are not helping me. And that I can really get to this point where I am no longer needing to engage in the compulsions. And coming to that realization is so powerful. And I can't even begin to explain how wonderful it feels. Um, like I finished my first year of college in May, and my OCD was not in the driver's seat. I got to the point where I was doing really well with my exposures, where I had been through all this intensive treatment. I'd gotten to the point where I was consistently resisting my compulsions. And weirdly, my first year of college was the year that I did best academically compared to all my other years in high school, where OCD was, controlling me. So realizing that OCD was actually preventing me from being a better student, even though I thought I needed OCD to be a great student, when really it was interfering with my ability to be a great student. So I think just kind of realizing that OCD is just going to, convince you. OCD, yes, I agree with what people are saying. OCD does suck. It really sucks. OCD just causes so much distress. And I think that it's also really difficult. And this is one reason why I really started um, OCD. One of the reasons why, or not the reason why I started OCD, the reason why I started advocating and really raising awareness and spreading, aware information about what real OCD looks like, and that it's not cleaning and just having, your colored pencils ordered in rainbow order. No, it's not that. It's debilitating, it's distressing, and it's extremely it can cause so much harm to you, and just it can really tear your life apart. As I had seen from my own personal experience, it really left me feeling like I had nothing, and it was, it was a really dark place. And I think that um knowing that your OCD is just out there just to not, it just is not there to help you, and it's just only preventing you from achieving your goals. And like I said, I think that, like I said, that was one of the main reasons why I started advocating, is I wanted people to know the true nature of OCD and know that it just isn't a joke. It's not a catchphrase. It's not a branding strategy as Khloe Kardashian uses it as. It's not any of those things. It's a debilitating lifelong disorder that is super, it just it's I mean, I'm left speechless to the point where I just, there's so many things that need to be said about it, and just how much harm it can cause. And I think one thing is, so many people, they don't really understand how debilitating OCD is. They think OCD is the way that it's, portrayed and depicted in the media, that it's just about cleaning or being organized, or just like having that, it being so satisfying when things are arranged in a certain way, and that things are looking like it's so visually appealing. It's like, no, it's not any of that. It's so much more. And I think that that prevents so many people from getting diagnosed, because they have real OCD. They have OCD that um, causes so much destruction, that um, brings about so much distress and anxiety. And they see what's depicted in the media, and they think, oh, that's what OCD looks like. When really, OCD is not enjoyable. If you like it, it's not OCD. It's not OCD that at all. If it's something that you enjoy, it's not OCD. And that's, I think, one of the main things that you really want to spread and share with people is that OCD is a monster, it's a bully, it's a liar. It's not something that's satisfying or cute. It's not a personality quirk. It's a real disorder. It's a real illness, and I think that's something that I am so passionate about spreading. Real information, real facts, just real truths and stories about the nature of OCD because, like I said, it is so harmful, and the misinformation that's being spread, all the false information, all of the false representations of OCD, that's preventing people from getting diagnosed, from receiving the treatment that they need to live happy, fulfilling lives. And that's what's keeping them stuck in the cycle of OCD. And that's, like I said, that's what's keeping them trapped. And I think it's, so important to know that really what it is. So if you see someone who's struggling with symptoms of OCD, it's an easily diagnosable thing, and that it's not something that takes years upon years of um, you know, diagnoses that are incorrect, that aren't accurate, to find out what it really is, because that's just years and years of life that's lost to suffering, that's lost to compulsions, that's lost to the obsessions, that is lost in thought and not allowing you to live in the moment because OCD takes away the things that bring us the most joy. OCD kept me so distracted and just so like preoccupied from things. Um because I was just so stuck in it, and it just took me away from the things that really matter in life. It made me believe that I was only my OCD and that I was nothing more, and then that was going to be my life. I didn't think that there was any future for me because I was so trapped in OCD and in everything that it told me. And I really couldn't experience life to the extent that you should be able to experience it. Like, this is one thing that I kind of like one story that I think about a lot is like my big thing was just like constantly I one compulsion of mine was constantly checking my grades. And I saw that I got less than perfect on a like Spanish exam, and I was actually at Hamilton and I was obsessing the entire time and ruminating on the fact that I got a less than perfect grade, and I wasn't focusing on seeing Hamilton. Like, I should have been able to enjoy that. I should have been able to focus on that in the moment. I should have been able to enjoy that. But that's just one example of the many like things that I know that I was lost in thought. Like this, here's another example. One thing that I remember is me feeling so anxious and distressed at Disneyland, which is supposed to be the happiest place on earth. And instead, I was obsessing and ruminating about my grades and about my homework and how I needed to get into a good college when I was like only 15 years old. And that wasn't something that I needed to worry about for 3 more years. So, yeah, OCD really keeps you lost in thought, and it seems so difficult to escape, and it is. But that's where exposure and response prevention comes in. You really start realizing that you don't need OCD to live a happy and fulfilling life, and that you really can live without OCD, and that you can live an even better life without OCD, and how exposure and response prevention can really um, give you your life back and can allow you to achieve all that you want to be able to achieve. Um, let's see. But I have loved getting to answer all your questions. And I think it's just so wonderful having these lives and being able to really talk about OCD and really be able to answer people's questions, because I know how isolating OCD can be. OCD can make you feel like you're the only one experiencing that thing when really there are so many people who are experiencing the exact same thing. So I think it's so wonderful that there's no CD out here and so many other people in the OCD community on Instagram, which I really encourage you to get a part of, whether it's just following a bunch of really awesome accounts. And once you follow one, you'll also I've found from my own experience, you'll find so many other really great accounts and you'll see other people who are really struggling with OCD, but also people who are overcoming it too. People who are doing all these wonderful things. Like I see people on Instagram who have families, who graduated college, who are therapists with OCD, and that's just so inspiring to me because I see these people living their lives, and I'm like, I can do the same too. And knowing that you're not alone is one of the best feelings and is something that OCD wants to try to deny us, that feeling of community and feeling that there are other people experiencing the same thing. Um, but I just want to thank everyone here joining us. And I've loved getting to come on and answer your questions and share my personal experiences. But again, I just want to emphasize that I am a person with lived experience with OCD. I am an OCD advocate, but I am not a clinician. I am not a professional. And all these things are from my experiences in treatment and in recovery and in the OCD community. I mean, I hope to one day become a therapist, and that's what I'm studying to be, but I am not a therapist. So that's one thing to recognize. But I have so enjoyed getting to come on here and talk with everyone and just really share my experiences. And hopefully, you have taken away something. Hopefully, you have gained something from watching this. And I really hope that I can come back again soon. I know that I have some future lives. I think I'll be on with Jenna again, which will be super fun. But I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening wherever you are in the world. I'm saying goodbye from California, and I will actually include my Instagram here one more time, the Road to Recovery from OCD with a bunch of underscores. But let me include the link one more time. To that, if you'd like to check out me, because I'm constantly posting on there, I'm constantly sharing my experiences. So I hope you all have a wonderful night, and we are going to end the live. Thank you.